And there are basically three approaches that people can be using when they talk about consciousness. The first one is about this experience of what it's like, which we call phenomenology. And there are several aspects to the phenomenology of consciousness for me that, in the way in which I use the word, refer to what its likeness. And the first one is consciousness is always happening now, in this moment. And it also seems to be what creates the sense of nowness. So and this, what characterizes now is what's currently the case in my perception. And then there is, beyond this present, also a presence. And this is basically the second order thing that is happening, that you're not just perceiving, but you also perceive that you are perceiving. And some philosophers call this higher order thought because it's a thought about something else, but I don't think it's a thought, it's a perception. A thought is somewhat decoupled. You can hold a thought for as long as you like, and it doesn't have to relate to what's around you. A thought, in a sense, is not so much in time, but the thinking happens in real time, right? You observe yourself to be thinking because you observe yourself exerting your mental muscles in this moment. So there is a perception involved when you think. And this perception of perception, that you are noticing what's happening, that is what is the second order perception of consciousness, which gives it a reflexive tinge. And you can also move beyond that. You can have a person perspective or a perspective from a self that looks from a certain angle. And this means that you zoom a little bit further out and you integrate it to the point where you simultaneously, with the object that is being perceived and with the fact that it is being perceived, also perceive the direction from which you perceive it, right? That you have a self. And in this way, the observer can constitute itself. But this is optional. You can also have states in deep meditation or in states of dreams at night where you can experience that stuff is just happening and there's nobody present who looks from a particular direction. So there's still consciousness, but there is no self. And there's also a state where you can transcend the self, where you basically go to a fourth order perspective, where you realize that perception is itself a representation inside of your mind, and you basically get to see this interplay between the self and the thing that's being perceived from the outside, where you see how your world model is being projected into the self model, and you're no longer that self, and you realize, oh, I'm not actually Joscha Bach, I'm not that guy. I run on his brain as far as I know, but I'm just this consciousness. And this guy is a story that is being created by me about what it would be like if this organism had a name and an identity and the social things that it cares about and so on. And the other approach for consciousness that is typically being taken in the sciences is looking at the mechanisms that might facilitate it. For instance, the neural correlates of consciousness, the default mode network, the stuff that goes on in the anterior insula and the prefrontal cortex and the claustrum and so on. And also the outside perspective, looking at the mechanical interactions of the organism and its world. But it's very difficult to relate these two descriptions to each other. How is it possible that a mechanical thing experiences what it's like? And this difficulty of associating this experience, the psychological reality, with the mechanical reality that we typically look at in the sciences is called the hard problem. And this hard problem seems to be a somewhat recent problem. Most cultures don't have it. It seems to be part of our scientific culture. And I wondered whether it's something that we came up with after the Enlightenment, after we got rid of the Christian superstitions. But when you read Goethe and Brentano and so on, they're all post-Enlightenment and they don't have this issue. It seems to be a 20th century thing, where we've basically forgotten how to deal with this kind of dreaming reality. And I think that there is a way in which you can make sense of it, and this is basically we look at the operation of consciousness. Consciousness is an operator on mental states. But your mental states are representations that you hold in your mind. You yourself are a representation in your mind. You're interacting with other representations dynamically. And consciousness is an operator that changes the content of your mind when it comes along. And so we can ask ourselves, how do my mental state changes when consciousness happens? So, for instance, between deep sleep and waking up, what changes? And what changes back when you space out and fall asleep? And what happens when you have an epiphany? And this operation of consciousness is something that makes us more coherent, and we can observe that.